Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT9, and BT9 offers us lots of new and powerful cards to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a brand new iteration on a red ShineGreymon OTK deck. So red ShineGreymon was a card that we got all the way back in BT4, and the whole point was we're going to have our tamers be able to suspend themselves when he's going to be attacking, so that way we could have our tamers be able to trigger his ability to give himself security attack plus for each of our suspended tamers. And now with BT9 we have easier ways to play our tamers, and we have more ways to be able to utilize the card to his utmost potential, making his swings safe, efficient, and powerful. So without further ado, onto the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running one copy of Koromon. So this is the BT5 Koromon. This could really be any Digitama you want it to be if you don't want it to be Koromon, but sometimes I do like the card draw that he offers, especially in the early to mid stages of the game when we're still trying to set up and develop. So what he's doing is that when we attack once per turn, if this Digimon contains Greymon or Omnimon in its name, then we get to draw one card. So it's just a good card draw engine for the deck, but most of the time we're going to be building our single stack in Raising, so I don't necessarily find it to be the most useful. Which is why I'm going to be running 4 copies of the BT9 Koromon as just one of the best generic DB boosters for the deck. So he just has the ability where during your turn, while this Digimon has Agumon or Greymon in its name, which is basically almost everything in the deck, then it gets plus 1000 DP, so it's just helping with the overall DP boosting of our Digimon, ensuring that when we're swinging, we're going to have as powerful of a Digimon as we can possibly make. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon. So this is the BT05 version of Agumon, and this Agumon is going to be one of the deck's main consistency tools. So it has the nice ability where when we hard play it, we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, and then we get to add one Digimon with Greymon in its name and one Digimon with Omnimon in its name from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So it's just looking for our higher stages, so that way we could try to build our perfect stack. And for that same style of reasoning, I'm also going to be running 4 copies of Agumon X Antibody. So Agumon X Antibody has a couple of different ways that we could play him, making him just a really good card to use. So we could Digivolve him for 0 on top of another Agumon, which is always nice to be able to trigger his on-play or when Digivolving conditions, where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, add 1 card with Greymon and Omnimon in its name from among them into our hand, along with the X Antibody option, and then the rest go to the bottom. So even though we're not necessarily playing the X Antibody option, you can shift the deck to include it if you really wanted to. It's still just a really good card to help dig out our Greymons and our Omnimons, which we're just trying to find our main combo pieces. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Agumon. So this is the promo version of Agumon, or at least a promo version of Agumon, and what this version of Agumon is doing is acting as just some more DP boosting. So if you don't necessarily have access to this card and you don't know what to swap out, just any Agumon that helps DP boost is going to be good enough in this slot. So what this one is doing versus some of the others and why I'm running it is because it has the nice ability where during your turn, while this Digimon has Greymon in its name, then it gets plus 2000 DP, making almost all of our higher stages even more powerful than they normally would be. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Greymon. So this is the BT5 version of Greymon, and this is a pretty decent Greymon for both its tempo and both its inheritable. So the tempo that it's offering is when we Digivolve up into him, if this Digimon has Agumon in its Digivolution source, then we get to gain 1 memory, which is pretty nice considering most of our low ends are Agumons. We won't be able to combo this with X Antibody unless X Antibody Digivolved on top of an Agumon, but it's still just good for that potential tempo. Then on top of that, it also has a nice inheritable ability for us to use that's acting similar to that promo Agumon, where it's just helping with the overall DP. So during your turn, while this Digimon has Omnimon or Greymon in its name, then it gets plus 2000 DP, so that way we could, again, try to make our main Mega and the cards that we're attacking with as powerful as we possibly can. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Greymon X Antibody. So Greymon X Antibody is another really good card to add some extra protection for the deck. So he can Digivolve on top of a Greymon for 0, which is good because it helps us cycle our deck. And on top of that, his inheritable ability, which is the main reason why we're running this card, adds some nice protection outside of just us trying to have some larger DP. So during all turns, when this Digimon has Greymon or Omnimon in its name, and it would be deleted or returned to the hand or deck by the opponent's card effects, then we get to trash it 2 cards of the same level from this Digimon's Digivolution source to prevent him from leaving play. So it just adds some extra option protection for when we're going to be making our big power swing to try to ensure that our main boss monster is going to be living through as many security checks as we could possibly make him. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Greymon. So this is the starter deck version of Greymon, and this is just one of the best cards in the whole deck, just because it's the best inheritable at just increasing our overall damage output. So its inheritable just states that it's going to be giving whatever we're Digivolving on top of Security Attack Plus to be able to make whatever Digimon we're going to be using hit a little bit harder. Next, on to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 4 copies of RizeGreymon. So RizeGreymon is a really good card to be able to set up our tamers, so that way we could try to use our ShineGreymon as effectively as we possibly can. So it has the Digiburst ability where we get to trash 2 of its Digivolution sources to gain the ability of being able to play a red or yellow tamer with a play cost of 4 or less from our hand for free. So this is just one of the big setup cards to easily play our tamers. And then on top of that, he has a nice when attacking inheritable ability for us to use. Even though it's not the greatest, it still could help, where if we have a tamer in play, then one of our opponent's Digimon gets minus 2000 DP, so it's just trying to help control the field, while it also has the ability passively, while it's on our field, to be able to count as a yellow Digimon in case we want to customize the deck and run the yellow ShineGreymon or various other yellow megas as well. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 4 copies of RizeGreymon X Antibody. So RizeGreymon X Antibody is an absolute powerhouse of a card. So we have the alternative Digivolution condition where we could Digivolve it for 1 on top of another RizeGreymon, or if we need to, at worst, it's not necessarily the greatest, but it's not the worst either, to be able to Digivolve it for 4 normally. So what we're trying to gain out of this card, like the other RizeGreymon, is just easy setup at being able to play our tamers, so that way we could try to deal as much damage as we possibly can with utilizing our tamers with our ShineGreymon. So he has the when Digivolving ability where we get to place 1 red or yellow tamer from our hand onto the field for free. Then if we have RizeGreymon or X Antibody in this Digimon's Digivolution source, then one of the opponent's Digimon gets minus 2000 DP for each red and yellow tamer that we have in play. So it's basically acting like a mini ShineGreymon from BT3, where we're just going to be nuking 1 Digimon on the opponent's field, acting as some more solid control, so that way we could try to get rid of their blockers and try to pave the way for our Digimon to be able to swing. But this card is kind of like a sub-boss monster in of itself, just because he has the ability where during your turn, for each tamer we have in play, this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP. He naturally already has 8000 DP on top of any DP boosts that we already have, so he could easily hit the opponent's security relatively hard if we don't necessarily see our main boss monster. And speaking of our main boss monster, I'm going to be running 4 copies of ShineGreymon. So this is the BT04 version of ShineGreymon, and he's just a pretty simple card to use, but effective nonetheless the way this deck is set up. So he has the ability where during your turn, when one of your red or yellow tamers is suspended, then this Digimon gains Security Attack +1 for the turn. So because all of our tamers are going to be suspending themselves, and all of our tamers are both red and yellow, every time one of those tamers is going to be suspending off of their own tamer ability, then that's going to give ShineGreymon an extra Security Attack Plus for each one we have on our field to be able to punch as hard as we possibly can. And then the last Digimon of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Omnimon. So Omnimon is in here just because he's a good win condition for when we punch the opponent's security. We want to use his when Digivolving abilities of unsuspending himself and Blitz to be able to make that final attack onto the opponent's security if we don't have a Digimon just sitting on our field already to be able to do that. Then if we do just end up leaving him on the field, then he's pretty safe where he just has some nice built-in protection where during all turns when this Digimon would be deleted or returned to the hand or deck by the opponent's card effects, then we could trash one level 6 from his inheritables to prevent him from being deleted, so that way he's going to be a very hard Digimon for the opponent to get rid of. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 2 copies of A Delicate Plan. So, A Delicate Plan is kind of a flex spot for the deck. You don't necessarily need to run it, but it doesn't hurt to run it nonetheless, just in case we don't necessarily have the best perfect stack. So what A Delicate Plan is doing is it's making our swing into the opponent's security even safer, where the main ability states that one of our Digimon, namely our boss monster, is going to gain the ability. This Digimon doesn't activate the security effects of options that are checked in the security for the turn. So this is just a really good way of trying to shut off the vast majority of possible threats in the opponent's security, in case we don't have Greymon X Antibody set up in its inheritables. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Red Memory Boost. So Red Memory Boost is just another consistency tool for the deck to use to help us, be able to find our parts and pieces. So we get to reveal the top 4 cards of our deck, add 1 red Digimon from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom, with this card going into the battle area to set up its second main ability of Delay to gain 2 memory at a later turn, to make sure that we could try to make our plays as powerful and efficient as we possibly can. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Sunrise Buster. So Sunrise Buster is a really powerful card to not only just help us set up our tamers, but control the opponent's field all at the same time. So its main ability states that we get to play a red or yellow tamer from our hand for free. Then for each of our red and yellow tamers we have in play, we get to have one of the opponent's Digimon get minus 3000 DP for the turn. So the more red and yellow tamers we have in play, the more powerful of a removal effect this becomes. Then it's also acting as a solid security threat, where its security ability activates its main, so it helps us set up on the opponent's turn if they're attacking into us, while also acting as some solid defense. And then lastly, onto the tamers, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Hiro. So Hiro is a really good tamer because, well, he suspends himself to be able to trigger ShineGreymon's ability to give him Security Attack Plus. But that's not the only reason why we're playing Hiro. Hiro is also going to be acting as the deck's dedicated memory fixing tamer. So at the start of our turn, if our memory is ever less than 3, he'll just always set us to 3 to be able to make our plays as effective and efficient as we possibly can. And on top of that, the ability that we're trying to use for making him suspend himself is during your turn. When you attack it with a Digimon that has Agumon in its name or is level 5 or higher, then we get to suspend this tamer to have 1 Digimon get plus 2000 DP for the turn. So we could theoretically use Marcus if we really wanted to, but I don't necessarily think the memory on attack is that relevant, when we could just try to DP boost our Digimon to make him as powerful as we possibly can. And the cool thing is, even if we don't need the buff on the ShineGreymon, if we have something else on the field, then we could transfer the buff over to the other Digimon. And then the last tamer of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Tai Inkari Kamiya. So Tai Inkari is another really good tamer, not only just to act as a good way for them to suspend themselves when we're attacking with our big boss monsters, to be able to make our ShineGreymon get even more Security Attack Plus, but it's also helping us gain some additional memory at the same time. So at the start of our turn, if we have 3 or fewer cards in our security, we get to gain 1 memory, and if the opponent has 3 or fewer cards in their security, then we get to gain another memory. But even without the memory gain, this is still just a really good tamer, just because it's suspending itself for our ShineGreymon, where during your turn, when one of your red or yellow Digimon attacks, we get to suspend this tamer to have all of the opponent's security Digimon get minus 2000 DP. So it's debuffing the opponent's security Digimon, making it so that we are going to have an easier time living through whatever we're going to be attacking to, and we don't necessarily have to worry a whole lot about our overall DP. And then there's still just a whole bunch of different tech and tools that we could include and change around in the deck, depending on your own personal playstyle and what you have access to. So if you wanted to, just to try to help be a little bit more low to the ground and aggressive to try to dig out our tamers to use, we could think about using the Classic Collection Agumon as a good way to dig out those tamers. Then we do have the Agumon low end that we could think about running, just because, well, we're already playing Hiro, and Agumon has some good interactions and synergies with Hiro, And this also allows us to run the promo hero as well if we really wanted to, so that way we have an alternative way to be able to give security attack plus to our ShineGreymon. But as far as a good budget replacement for the promo Agumon, you could just use the starter deck because most of the time we're just going to be attacking the opponent anyway, and well, if they're just both gaining 2000 DP for attacking the opponent anyway, then this Agumon is just the best substitute for that. Then, if you wanted to, you could also run Agumon for that hybrid factor as an alternate win condition for when we break the opponent's security. If we have memory left over and we could potentially gain memory if we're utilizing Marcus, then Agumon might be pretty good. Then, if you do want some more red and yellow synergy, we do have Dino-Human as another good card to use for that synergy, just because he's also helping DP reduce the opponent's Digimon when we're attacking, so that way we have an easier time clearing through whatever we need to. And then as far as some alternate megas that we could think about using, or some supporting megas, we do have the starter deck ShineGreymon, just because he naturally has piercing and he naturally has security attack +1, so he's just another really good card to use to try to punch the opponent's security as hard as we possibly can with. Or for a more controlling side of things, you could just run a yellow package and you could just run a yellow ShineGreymon. Even though he's not going to be the most effective at dealing lots of damage, he's still just a control tool to use to try to mitigate and control the opponent's field. But if you do just want to shift the deck and play something a little bit more spicier, then you could run RizeGreymon and RizeGreymon X Antibody as some really good cards to help deal some extra damage. So RizeGreymon is really good at being able to multi-attack, and if we have ways of giving him security attack plus, then he just can multi-attack with security attack plus, with the red RizeGreymon being able to help us gain some memory, and that allows us to use the X Antibody stuff a little bit easier. And speaking of the X Antibody stuff, you could run the X Antibody option just because we're still utilizing X Antibody in some capacity. And similarly to that, we could also just run Cool Boy, just because Cool Boy is utilizing the fact that we want to run the option and we already are going to be playing X Antibodies to be able to gain some extra memory and card draw, to be able to find our parts and pieces and make sure we could combo off as easily and consistently as we possibly can. Then we do have Digivolution Plugin S as a good, cheap way to be able to reduce the cost of our evolution, because the majority of the time we're going to be wanting to Digivolve is going to be into our Shine, and Shine costs 3, so Plugin S not only helps basically make our evolution cost 2, because that's the cost of the option, but it helps us draw our cards, and it helps us find some of our parts and pieces as a good security threat. Then if you do just want some extra tempo to be able to make sure that you could be able to kill the opponent, then you also do have a card like Gravity Crush just to be able to gain 2 memory, and if the opponent is going to be losing that turn, then giving them 2 memory at the end of the turn doesn't really matter. And then as an alternative card to try to help play our Tamers, we do have Trident Revolver as another good option to try to delete the opponent's Digimon and play our Tamers all at the same time, but it is just a worse version of Sunrise Buster. And then another good Tekken tool to try to help draw us cards and to be able to be as consistent as we possibly can is going to be Fireball, just because if we're not deleting the opponent's low-level Digimon, then we're going to be drawing 2 cards, so this is an absolutely fantastic card to try to help unbrick yourself. But for the most part, this is just my interpretation of a really solid core or shell for a ShineGreymon OTK deck, because, well, I think that there's still just a lot of possibilities that we could do with cards that we haven't really been utilizing before, and the fact that the new RizeGreymons help play our Tamers just make being able to use Shine even easier than ever before, and because this is an OTK deck in the OTK format, it still has some competitive viability. Even though it might not be hyper tier 1 meta competitive, it still can take the opponent by surprise if they're not necessarily aware of exactly what your cards are going to be able to do. Even though the vast majority of the cards is just utilizing the Greymon X Antibody stuff, just because that's really good, it's still just the top end that might catch the opponent off guard. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.